Hi, my name's Kathy Bissell. Welcome to the Golf Show 2.0. This week, we're pleased to have a fellow journalist, only she talks to bigwigs all the time. Her name is Ann Liguori, and you may have heard her if you're in the New York market with a program called What's the Story, Liguori, years ago. Now she has a new book out. And you want to explain what your book's about, and then we'll pepper you with questions.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. Two of my favorite people in the golf biz, and we've known each other for just a little bit of time, right?
Yep.
Since we were all 12 years old.
Yes.
But I'm very excited because this is my second book. It's been many years since my first, but the book that's coming out is called Life on the Green, Lessons and Wisdom from Legends of Golf. And it's basically, I interviewed 12 legends in golf, 6 women, 6 men. And it's basically what they bring from their iconic golf careers to their day-to-day life. So it really is more about life wisdom and sharing great stories. And it really, anybody can read it and benefit and be inspired. But it's just, you know how it is. Golf teaches us so much, and it kind of translates to our lives. And each one of my legends was just so very generous with their time and so very wonderful in sharing personal aspects of their life that mean so much and that they want to share with other people. So I'm just delighted with the book. Can't wait till it comes out.
How did you pick your subjects or your victims, as Gary would say?
My victims, well, let's see, Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, Padraig Harrington, Tom Watson, Ben Crenshaw, Jan Stephenson, Nancy Lopez, Dottie Pepper, Amy Alcott, Renee Powell, to name a few. I really thought long and hard about who should be in this book. They have to be ultimate role models. They have to be very inspirational. They have to want to be in the book, obviously, and tell their stories. And these 12 people were more than happy to accommodate me, give me the time I needed to interview them. None of them asked for a penny. They just were so gracious. So it's kind of like a throwback to yesteryear when I was doing my TV show called Sports Interview and interviewed people like Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle and Hank Aaron and Billie Jean King, and not one person asked for a dime. They all just wanted to tell their stories, and they all were great storytellers. And of course, that's not the case anymore with a lot of current day athletes. So I just really I had to think long and hard who I wanted in the book. I decided to go with 12 personalities, 6 men, 6 women, and everyone fit the bill perfectly. Everyone was extremely inspirational and had a lot of wisdom to share. So I'm thrilled that they all cooperated. They did. And, I'm just excited that they are all part of this incredible collection of iconic personalities in the sport.
So I guess the fact that I asked for $19 in cash kept me from being included, because everything you said pretty much described me: iconic, inspirational, all the other blather. Yeah.
You'll be in the next book, Gary, I promise.
Yes.
I'll only pay you $20 for your time.
Yeah. When you do the book about titled Media Scum, I'll be in that one. So why don't you just tell us what was maybe the one most unexpected thing you heard from any of these icons about any aspect of their life?
I think Padraig Harrington, Gary, he told me that he plays with fear every day. Not just nerves, but fear. Every day, even now when he tees it up on the Champions Tour or on the regular tour, he is fearful. And he talks about how he overcomes that fear and the nerves. And I just thought that was a revelation, because I understand that you can be nervous. As accomplished as these legends are, they still get nervous when they're out there on the golf course or doing other things, right? But I mean, for Padraig to tell me that he still has fear that all of a sudden the game will disappear, fear that if he takes off for a couple weeks and then resumes his competitive career, that he just won't have it anymore. So there's all this fear in his head that he has to overcome day in and day out. And then also, in addition to that, he's told me that he really does still feel underappreciated as a winner of 3 major championships and
Wow.
as such a legend. And the other thing that he reveals in the book is how he approaches tournament weeks and what he does mentally to try to win tournaments week in and week out. And that I'll let you read in the book, but it's just fascinating material from, you know, a young, well, he's not as old as the other people in the book, right? Some of the legends. I mean, Jack and Gary and Ben Crenshaw and Tom Watson. Padraig is still playing great golf, and he's had an incredible career, but he's still, you know, he's on the Champions Tour now playing well, winning, but he still plays with fear. And that really struck me.
I thought it was interesting that you picked Jan Stephenson because she did a lot of interesting things on the women's side of the game. And I think for people who don't realize how hard she works for the LPGA, they may have had a different view of her than is reality. And you exposed some of that.
Absolutely. Jan Stephenson, she had a very, very fascinating life and is still going strong. And I think they need to make her turn her life into a made for, you know, a motion picture. I mean, it's just incredible, her life. Came over as a young rookie, beautiful, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman from Australia. And, you know, she didn't know the ways of America. She was away from her parents and anybody really that any family at all. And the LPGA used her to sell sex appeal on the tour. And she didn't say no. She said, okay, here I am. And she did admit that all the time she put in doing appearances, wearing mini skirts, you know, getting photographed with Joe Namath and a lot of other celebrities back then. It took a lot of time away from her practice schedule. And she did say that, you know, she could have won a lot more championships, she thought, had she been able to put in more of that time into practicing. So it was just a very revealing interview. Jan Stephenson went through a lot. You know, she got mugged years later and hurt her fingers in her hand. She still doesn't have feeling in some of the fingers on her left hand. And she overcame a lot to do what she's doing. And, you know, back in the day when she was posing in a bathtub full of Max Fly golf balls, you know, with nothing else on, but golf balls covering her in the bathtub, her colleagues on tour were completely appalled and really upset that she was doing this kind of thing and didn't think it was right, that she shouldn't have to sell sex appeal to sell the tour. And she claims, and the LPGA at the time claimed, that that's what saved the tour. So those same women who were criticizing her and who were talking about her, and she'd hear the whispers when she went into the locker room, and she knew immediately that they were gossiping about her. She says she is now friendly with most of those women now, all these years later. But back then it was tough because she really felt alienated because they really disliked what she was doing.
You know, I have a friend who was going through Q school while Jan was already successful on the tour, or she had fallen off the tour and then had to qualify again or something. And she was sick. And Jan showed up and made her like soup and put her to bed and made sure she was okay. And she said to my friend, if you ever tell anybody about this, that I did this, I'll kill you. I want them to think I'm tough all the time. So she's probably a whole lot nicer than many people have given her credit for.
Absolutely.
That was sweet.
She's a softie at heart, and she was so cooperative when it came to doing this book with all the ups and downs that she has experienced in her life. I just find her fascinating, and she was very generous with her time. And you know, her chapter is all about goal setting. That's her main message. And her father basically set goals for her when she was when she was a young girl, and he managed her whole career. You know, you are going to practice, you are going to go and play these tournaments. And Jan and her brother, she wanted to be a surfer at one point in her life. And Then one day it was very cold and she just was not going to go in the water, and she realized that golf might be a little more palatable. But,
I thought the part about her finding golf balls in a water hazard at their place where their parents played golf, and then her brother trying to catch poisonous snakes to sell to people. I thought, I mean, Australia has like a gazillion poisonous snakes. You could probably trip over them every day of your life. I mean, it's dangerous to live down there. And here's this 9-year-old kid out trying to catch them. I mean,
yeah, she snuck on the golf course with her brother, but they were more entrepreneurs at that age, very young, trying to make a buck because kids really weren't allowed to play on the course at the time. And then her father just said, hey, okay, you want to play golf? Let's do it. You're going to focus on golf, and let's just make a game plan for you. So he was the goal setter and she followed his lead, and he caddied for her for many, many years as well. And then when he passed away, she had to learn how to kind of initiate all that on her own. And the goal setting is still something that she does with her business, wine and spirits business that she has, and with the golf course that she owns in Palm Harbor, Florida. So she's still setting goals now as an entrepreneur and a businesswoman. So a lot of these themes in each of these chapters are just so contemporary. These are themes that we all can live by. There, whether you set goals as a child, you can still set goals now as an adult and be inspired by their messages. And it was uncanny how each one of these personalities picked a different theme. I really didn't have to lead them into any. I wanted every chapter to be different, of course. So when Annika Sorenstam talked about being patient as a golfer, which, Gary, is so crucial. You have to have patience as a golfer. And I'm not patient. Who's patient in this day and age, right? But you have to learn patience. And then how that patience, that virtue carried over with Annika Sorenstam as a mother. You have to be patient as a mom. And it was just such a wonderful coming together of all these themes and all this wisdom. And everybody had a different theme. And so it all kind of came together beautifully. And I just kind of focused when I heard something different, I kind of focused on that theme and kind of aligned my questioning as an interviewer, toward that particular theme. And I think
I thought it was funny how Annika, for all the tournaments she won, she really didn't become, how I say, a big name until she played at Colonial. And that totally changed everyone's view of her, except for, a few Neanderthal people. But it was, she kind of like a VJ Singh, not to bring up his name, but she was so into the golf that her personality never came out. And then finally, when she realized that the people were all rooting for her at Colonial, that was a different chapter of her life.
Yeah. And I think one of the elements of that story, Gary, is that it was a PGA Tour event, and they got a heck of a lot more attention than the LPGA. So all of a sudden, you have this LPGA superstar playing in a PGA Tour event, and so many more eyeballs are seeing her. And she was very honest and open about her nerves and how frightening that was for her, teeing it up in a PGA Tour event. So I just think a lot of people saw her and they were introduced to her more because they watched the guys play. And now she's playing in all these celebrity tournaments, and she has this incredible resurgence of her career because she's playing with these male celebrities in these tournaments and she's beating them. So people are seeing a lot more of Annika even now, perhaps, than they did when she played on the tour, because she's playing in these very high profile celebrity tournaments and she's doing very well.
Well, she wasn't as appreciated as she should have been because she kept her guard up. She wasn't the most media friendly person out there because she had a lot of requests, but she and Kari Webb both carried the torch for the tour for a while, and they didn't get along that great with the media. They, didn't want to be bothered, I think, or maybe were fearful of media. Just weren't exposed to the media.
I think they were shy.
Once media got to know her, she became much more popular, much more interesting.
The thing about golfers is in order to be good at golf, you have to be practicing all the time. And when you do that, your social skills kind of go in the tank. And so I think for an Annika or for a Kari Webb and any number of people, men and women both, you have to grab yourself by the shoulders and shake a personality out of yourself to be able to talk to other people and get them interested in your career and what you're doing, because it can only benefit people.
Absolutely.
Whoever the golfer
these
is.
golfers have to spend so much time, as you say, practicing, playing. The fact that they even have time for all the things off the golf course and still they can focus on golf and shoot in the 60s consistently. It's amazing to me how they manage their time. And a lot of these golfers are very young and don't have the experience of talking to the media and being personable. And that was before the age of social media. Now all these young people are just grow up doing social media and putting themselves out there and talking into their phones. But, Annika didn't have that growing up. So I think it took her a while. Now she's terrific. I hear her on the radio. She and her husband, who manages her career, they have a radio on Sirius, PGA Tour Radio. And she's wonderful. But I think it takes time to develop those skills for anybody.
Yes.
Well, I think you should be commended for being able to get more than 2 or 3 words out of Gary Player. He hates talking. He's not opinionated, and he's kind of a Debbie Downer all the time. Can you describe that experience? I'm being sarcastic, of course.
While we're laughing, Gary Player is the most personable human being in the world.
88 years
more
young.
Energy and more positive energy than I think anybody I've ever met.
And of course, what's the name of his chapter? Of course, passion. Be passionate about what you want to do and what you want to pursue. And who better than Gary Player to talk about passion? The guy is an inspiration. I call him an international treasure. I remember interviewing him many, many different times, but one time I did it for a TV show I was recording, and I went to his daughter's house. And he was there, and we ended up doing push-ups and sit-ups in his driveway on the cement. And I could hardly keep up with him. And I just think he's so inspirational. His messages are very, very positive. And I think young people really should take note and listen to what he has to say. And he's very willing, as you know, to share that wisdom. So that was a very easy chapter to do because, as you know, he just loves to talk and he loves to share his positivity, which I think is a good thing.
Just plug a nickel in him and he's off and running. And he knows he's been around the world. He knows so much about everything.
Yeah.
I remember sitting at a dinner table with him at the Hall of Fame voting session we were at. And he says, Gary, did you know that by 2040, they're predicting that West End of London will be mostly Muslim? Because there are, he said, there are already many Muslims living there and they're all under orders to have 10 or 12 children. And they're and it's happening faster than they think. It's like, first of all, this was like 6-8 years ago. I'd never heard of this. And turned out he was exactly right. But he just, out of nowhere, he pulls these factoids in that he's learned, and he can't wait to share them with you.
He has won more international tournaments. He has won more international tournaments than anybody. And so he's traveled. Can you imagine his frequent flyer mileage, what that's up to now? He's traveled more, and he continues to travel. He goes, to South Africa a lot.
He had to play golf professionally. He had to. I mean, I'm sure he didn't want to leave his home, but South Africa is not exactly next door to anything. It's not next door to Australia. It's not next door.
He wanted to. I mean, he could have moved over to the U.S. like a lot of other people and just played in the U.S., but he wanted, there's a whole world of people out there who he has information. He has to get to them.
What struck me also about Gary is he came from a very poor, unhappy childhood. I don't know if you read that chapter yet, Kathy, but
not that one. I've read a couple of. I haven't read everything.
I don't. Why don't you tell us a little bit of that, Ann? Because I don't think most people know about that.
Yeah, I mean, he grew up in South Africa. He said his dad worked all the time, I believe his mother wasn't around. She might have passed away when he was very, very young. And he had to travel very, very far to commute to a good school. And so he spent a lot of time commuting. And then when he did finally get home, nobody was home. His brother was in, I guess, in the military. So he was already away from home. And he said he cried himself to sleep a lot. He just was not happy. And, I just think he realized at a very early age, you develop that hunger. I saw a lot of similarities between Gary Player and Bernhard Langer. Bernhard Langer grew up very poor.
Yeah.
And you wonder why Bernhard Langer, at his age, of course, he just got injured, unfortunately, but he's, was still going strong at the age of 66. They develop this hunger at a very early age. And no matter what kind of success they have, it kind of reverts back to those childhood days where they had very, very, very little. And they had this passion to compete, to succeed, and to have a better life.
Well,
and I think that is what drives.
He and his father walked from Austria to get out of the Nazi-occupied places still, or communist-occupied places, sometime after World War II or in the 50s, because Bernhard's not that. It wouldn't have been after World War II. It had to be after, but not very long after.
They actually made a movie about that, and Bernhard's role was Bernhard was played by Julie Andrews. I don't even remember that movie.
Yeah, well, it's the same deal. But he, like a lot of people, they were just trying to escape the situation they were in,
right.
And so I'm sure they left with the clothes on their back, because that's what
his father's farm was burned to the ground. So his father went to Germany, came to Germany with nothing. And they were so poor. His brother ended up getting a job as a caddy at a golf course and brought home some coins. And Bernhard was just so impressed. He said, where did you get that money? And his brother said, I was caddying at this local golf club. Why don't you come and see if we can get you involved as well? And then that started his love affair with golf. Bernhard went to this local golf course. He didn't know anything about the sport, but he learned it quickly. And he just he ingratiated himself to wealthy members who could afford to play golf. And a wealthy guy took him under his wing and said, I want you to caddy for me at this tournament I'm playing in another city. And Bernhard said, sure. And he just said, all I had to do was smile. He said, he said his mother was a waitress. And so as a young boy, he would work with her a little bit in the restaurant. And he learned quickly that if he smiled and was nice to people, he would get tips. And so he brought that philosophy to the golf course. If he smiled and could help that person play better golf, he'd make more tip money. And he put himself, he earned a living. This was when he was only, 10, 11 years old. And he learned golf very quickly and became a professional golfer very early in his career. But I just see similarities between Bernhard Langer and Gary Player, having grown up in very poor surroundings earlier in their life. That hunger and that motivation to continue to succeed is, I think, part of their childhood and what they had to overcome as young people.
How did you get the idea to do this particular book? I know you've done books about celebrities before, or primarily celebrities, but what you woke up one morning and boom, all of a sudden this idea was in your head? Or
well, it's interesting, Kathy. I always wanted to do a book on the sports legends that I've interviewed, going back to Mickey Mantle and Ted Williams and Hank Aaron, Wilt Chamberlain, all these personalities that when I was in my 20s and 30s and they were quite older, but I couldn't sell that book. And a publisher came along when I was in my quest to find a publisher who said, I know you're in the golf world. Would you consider writing a book about golf? And, we thought long and hard, and we kind of both put our heads together, Hatherley Press. And they said that they do pretty much inspirational books. And I said, I'm in. I love inspiration. I love uplifting books and, things that can help people. And so we came to this a particular book where I would interview golfers, stay in the golf genre, and that it would be positive, uplifting, very educational. And so I guess I might have one more book in me down the road. Maybe eventually I'll sell that other book about the sports legends and the stories behind the stories, and how I was on cable television for 17 years with this show called Sports Interview. And I had to go out and bring in the sponsorship dollars for that just to get it on the air. I know you have a similar story, Kathy, but back in the day, MSG Network said, "Ann, we love your work," when I was trying to pitch them the show to find at least one station to carry the show. And they say, "We love your work. We see your byline in USA Today. We hear your reports on ABC Radio Sports Network." I used to cover every team in New York back then. They said, "We have a time slot for you, but we can't pay you." So I tried to figure out how I was going to put a show on the air and be able to finance it. And that's when I went out and started bringing in my own sponsors to support the show. And 17 years later, that show was still on the air. And I, acquired 500 interviews with legends, and I maintained the rights to all those shows, and I still license out those shows. But anyway, one day there's a book about that.
I would think there's totally a book there, because nobody's getting a new Mickey Mantle or Ted Williams interview. No. These guys are gone. Maybe they're too old news, but I think, I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm not a book publisher, but who wouldn't want to read some candid stuff from these guys, these men and women athletes, superstars that we don't have anymore?
My thoughts precisely. So maybe, it's just the next one around, and I have a lot of personal stories about overcoming the challenges and obstacles of being a woman in sports broadcasting back in the, late 80s and 90s, and what that is like. Of course, Kathy and I share a lot of war stories in that department. And I think we have a lot to say. And women now are getting so many more opportunities in sports broadcasting. But back in the day when I know I first started, it was really difficult. And in addition, I was living in the most expensive city in the world at that time, New York City, and trying to pay the rent and pursue this career as a female in sports journalism and broadcasting. So it was a lot to overcome. I had a lot of personal and professional challenges. My dad had passed away when I was a junior in college. And then when I went to New York City on a fellowship program, I had just lost my 22-year-old brother, and that was very tough. So I went to New York right out of college with a lot of personal tragedy to deal with. And I just focused on work, and it was a good therapy. The challenge of New York City, of making a living in New York City and trying to navigate my way, a small town girl in the Big Apple. So I have a lot of personal stories I'd like to tell one day.
There's probably a book in that.
I hope so.
That will be the third one, I think. Maybe the fourth one.
The Liguori trilogy.
That's
exactly.
Before we change everybody's
don't put Ewoks in the third one. That'll ruin it.
Ewoks ruin everything? Is that the deal?
If you're trying to be serious, yeah.
I see. I have something here, Gary, that we need to do. I'd almost forgotten it.
Surely not a shameless plug. Ann wouldn't know about that either.
Go for it, guys.
Now it's free. You'll just get alerted when there's a new episode. You won't get your name sold to a mailing list, and you'll help us out in the unlikely event this were ever to become a profitable venture. But don't worry about that. Just click like and click on subscribe.
Because wasn't Ann likable, and don't you love her story? We do.
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course.
Well, I love you guys, and we've gone through a lot together through the years. So it's such a pleasure to kind of hang. We could do this all day.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to take any more of your day, but thank you for giving us 30 minutes. That was the fastest 30 minutes in the
Seriously?
history of
It's over already?
Yeah.
Well,
Give people the title of your book one more time, Ann, and obviously you can find any book at Amazon, but remind them of the title.
It's called Life on the Green, Lessons and Wisdom from Legends of Golf, and it's published by Hatherley Press. and distributed by Penguin and Random House. And yes, you can pre-order it now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any of those stores that carry books, you can order it. And it should be in stores by early March. So I'm very excited.
We are too. Look forward to seeing you down the road at a golf tournament soon, one of these days.
Yeah, we
Hey,
maybe
it's
will
so much
see you in
fun.
a little place I like to call Augusta.
I'll see you at Augusta, in Augusta. And we didn't even talk about Liv.
We can do that next time.
We can do that
Maybe
next
that'll
time.
be settled.
So many topics in golf
I know.
to ponder. So, but thank you so much for giving me some time for the book. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. Anytime. You have to
Now
come
get
back.
out there and sell.
That's right. Do autograph parties.
Definitely.
That's what
I
you
have
got
a
to
whole
do. You
list.
got to book yourself. You know, what does every PGA Tour event have in common? The media in that town, when the tour comes to town, it's a big deal. And the media, a lot of times you see it, the local news station comes out and sets up at the course. They'll do their newscasts from there. They have all this time to fill, and they don't have any expert commentary to fill it. They would love to have someone who's written a book on the PGA Tour or on golf be there and fill a couple of segments for them. But you got to contact everybody yourself, book it yourself. But if you follow the tour, you could get
how to do that, Gary.
books in every town. But it's a lot of work. It
I
probably costs a lot
know.
of
Well,
money.
I'm excited to say I'm going to be the keynote speaker at the Cognizant Classic at PJ National for that PJ Tour event. They have a Women's Leadership Day. That's February 28th. I'm also going to be the lead speaker at the Valspar during their Women's Day. And I have a lot of fun book signings and speaking engagements coming up. And everybody who is at the Golf Writers Dinner at the Masters on, when is it? April 10, will get a copy of my book in their goodie bag. Courtesy of Tourism Ireland. Wasn't that nice of Tourism Ireland to make that gift?
Nice.
That's a good move because none of those cheap writers were going to go out and buy it. So you got it in their hands the right way. Good move.
I love it, Gary. You call it like you see it.
That's the truth.
Thank you very
The media
much.
motto is, if it's free, take three.
Exactly.
Thanks for being on, Ann.
Hey, really enjoyed it. Thanks so much. Let's do it again soon.